Naya, morning, Valentine.
Good morning.
Good to see you. We have Mr. C. Morning.
Good morning, Naya. Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Tunde,
I am
Nwaji.
Mr.
And
C.
good morning, Lagos.
Sorry,
morning.
on Twitter. Greetings. And then we have Waji. Morning, Waji.
Morning, Ayo, Valentine, Tunde, Big C, and good morning, Lagos.
Great
Morning,
stuff.
G.
Mr. C. Oh, Waji is at the corporate MC on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter at Smooth981FM using the hashtag freshlypressed981.
You can send messages through WhatsApp to 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981.
All right, let's go straight to our first story here. Tunde, NMA ex-president laments challenges facing medical education. The former president of the Nigeria Medical Association, NMA, Professor Dominic Osage, has expressed worry over the increasing challenges facing medical education in the country. He made this known at the fourth white coat ceremony of the School of Clinical Medicine in Igbinedion University, Okada. Now, yesterday, interestingly, we touched on a number of stories addressing health. We looked at the health report on a survey done on Nigerians' reaction to mental health, looked at other areas. So it's interesting that we're looking at health as well for our first story. Please take us through the details.
Yeah, in essence, we're grossly understaffed in that regard. In terms of resources, we don't have adequate medical resources. And the highlight is, well, it's two sides. I mean, there's one where you look at the quality of medical graduates that we're producing, and then the other half is, are we retaining them? I'd like to argue that even with the inadequacies and the issues that we may have in terms of maybe the quality, we still produce fairly decent medical professionals, especially when you look at that, medicine is localized to the environment that you're in, which is why when they have to go to other countries, they're required to do a raft of examinations to be allowed to practice, or they have to work in some they're assigned to some area of that new country to work in for a period of time before they can go wherever they want. So and also many people have experiences of not wanting to do a procedure in Nigeria, only to travel abroad to find out that it's a Nigerian. And sometimes maybe even the Nigerian, you didn't want to do it here. That is the one that will do it for you over there.
Somebody that understands the tropical aspects
of the medicine. So we are producing, fairly decent graduates.
Yeah.
The issue here is being able to retain them.
Yes.
Because it points out that we produce about 3,000. According to records that are available, we produce 3,000. 2,000 are exported, and we're only able to retain 1,000.
Actually, we don't export them; they emigrate.
Yeah,
so it's not like we're giving them.
It's not like we're giving we're giving them out there. But he chose the word export because you can only describe it as that because you're looking at it from government strategy and perspective,
that
right?
doesn't make any sense because it's not like the Cuban example where Cuba actually exports.
Or Kenya, Kenya was exporting to the US specifically because they funded
Nigerian
schools
doctors.
there.
But the point is, Cuba and Kenya receive some kind of funding.
That's what I mean.
Revenue.
No. Because they have this is term. Okay. Anyway, 2,000 leave. We have 1,000 left.
Yeah.
The WHO standards are that you should have one doctor, at minimum one doctor to 600 people. At present, with the difference that we have one to 6,000. Even if those 2,000 didn't leave, would have 1 to 2,000, right? So we're still far off, even if nobody left. We're still far off the standards, and then we're worse off because of the number of people that leave. But the truth is, look, doctors gotta eat. That's true.
So what can be done? Because we've talked about this last year. We talked about the fact that one of the ministers famously said that they should go. We have so many doctors already. So
people say those things when too often we find people in office and position who don't look at data and don't look at records. If you had the data, you wouldn't say something like we've got too many doctors. We don't have too many doctors. And I was coming to potentially what could be done, and that's what I was going to do. Why are they leaving? For a better life, that's truth. Doctors have families to feed. They have to eat as well. And contrary to popular opinion, the medical or doctors is not one of those professions that guarantee you high pay. It may guarantee you a job in that there is a doctor wherever it is that you go. But if you stay within the general tracks, many of them don't end up with a lot of money or a lot of a lot of wealth. So that's why they're leaving. What can we do? Meanwhile, we have this huge need. Health-wise, just potentially look at the UK model now. If we say we took healthcare seriously, Here we've in the country we've tried to establish public health centers, right? But we could go a step further and allow doctors, because that's what, again, in UK, a doctor can go and set up a practice.
Yeah.
If you set up a practice and you have registered patients that are coming there, you get a subvention from the government.
Yes.
So create reasons and incentives for the doctors to stay and provide healthcare to the populace.
Very well said. Thank you very much, Tunde. I'll move to you, Nwaji. UK renews bid to seize £117 million Ibori loot. Now, a British prosecutor yesterday launched a fresh attempt to confiscate millions of pounds stolen by a former governor of Delta State, James Ibori, who was convicted of money laundering and graft in Britain. Of course, we know that James Ibori is now back in the country and back to, I guess, normal life. But please, Nwaji, take us through this story.
What else do you want to say? It's loot that James Ibori accumulated, through whatever means he accumulated it in the time that he was in office, and moved it to the United Kingdom, where he was he had moved to or quote unquote went to at some particular aspect, and now the UK government is trying to get access to that particular amount of cash, and there's a lot of back and forth. And this, for me, are the legacies of the issues with corruption.
Yes.
That have existed for a very long time. And in fairness to Buhari, when he first came into power, these were the arguments that he was making with regards to how did this money even get into the hands of the financial instruments of this particular country.
Yeah.
So I always find it very rich when I hear arguments of they're trying to seize this particular loot. Are they trying to seize this loot to return it to Nigeria? Or are they trying to seize it to have it remain within the UK system and they can now gain interest on it and do whatever they have to do? There are statistics and reports that indicate how much particular international banks have made from just the proceeds and the investment returns from the Abacha loot. So I always have a very side eye when I read these kind of articles about them trying to seize this loot. I don't even know what that means, because what it just tells me is that you're just trying to have access to it so you can use it to make investments or some kind of things and just make it. Because think about it, it's free startup capital to pretty much do whatever you want to do if you have access to it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in this conversation about working with the Nigerian authorities to return this money to Nigeria, because that's actually where it belongs. It's state money that was illicitly acquired and then moved to that particular location. So forgive me, I'm not a big fan of understanding the intent of what they're trying to do unless it points towards some kind of arrangement of returning that money to Nigeria.
Now, let me just give us a clear idea of what this is. This is 55,308,977,100 Nigerian naira. So we're not just exporting our doctors, we're exporting our funds too, because like you mentioned, these people are very, very dogged when it comes to recovering loot, recovering monies. And guess what? Oftentimes they don't return it back to the country of origin. They sometimes reach a deal, somewhere, but they usually don't.
And you see, to your point, right? Good Luck actually made this statement when there was this big brouhaha about $20 billion missing. And he made a statement that people found comical at the time.
America will know.
Well, he said America will know where that money is. And after the hacker, he said that, but people were like, no, he's making a fantastic point. That money cannot just exist in the cloud. It has to sit somewhere.
Yes.
And somebody has signed off, agreed, and actually given permission for that money to be where it is. So I'm sorry, I find it very rich of the UK government to come out and say they're trying to seize these funds. But my first question is, how did those funds even get into your bank?
It's not even yours.
I don't understand. It's not like you have a whole bunch of UK operated banks domiciled here in Nigeria where you can just go and make those cash deposits. No.
If it's questionable money, you allowed it to come into your coffers. You took it.
This is Western hypocrisy at its best.
Yeah.
When it's time to collect the money, your morals and your laws are very quiet. But when now it's time to talk about corruption, you want to shout.
Ibori, convicted of corruption, was received with pomp and pageantry from the people he stole from and made their lives miserable. I just hope Nigerians are not the most terrible people in the world.
Bless you, Benga. You get the leadership.
We hope so too.
Dr. I says, into the doctor's story, he said doctors are leaving because 1, poor infrastructure, 2, poor pay, 3, poor government attitude and policy to health, 4, poor health attitude of the Nigerian society to healthcare and the workers. Thank you, doctor. All
right, thank you very much. We move on to our next story, Mr. C. Now, when I saw this break yesterday, I didn't even know what to say. We had a record number of collapses of the power grid last year, and we thought it would hopefully go with 2019. However, we're just new in 2020, and in 2 hours, the power grid collapsed twice. Please take us to this report from the Punch.
Record-breaking collapse.
Breaking records for the wrong.
Did you have
reasons.
light to see, Mr. C?
I had light. Okay, so let's backtrack a bit. Nigeria's power industry has been bedeviled with problems for at least the last 2 decades, if not longer. Now, we run a very funny transmission system here. Everything is on one grid. So any fault from any location shuts down the grid. And our transmission system is old. The infrastructure is old. We do not have enough equipment. So let me explain what I'm saying. We generate about 7,000 plus megawatts. But at any given point in time, we can only transmit about 5,000 plus megawatts through the system. Anything more than that, the system will collapse. Last year, the federal government luckily entered into an agreement with Siemens to overhaul the transmission system. I am aware that phase 1 is about to end first quarter.
Yes.
And we're going to see improvements because the missing 2,000 megawatts, they want to put it back onto the transmission system, and they're upgrading the equipment.
Right.
This is why we're here today, is because over the years we failed to do what we should have done each and every year, which is continue to invest in the transmission system, continue to maintain it, continue to overhaul it, continue to upgrade it. We haven't done that, and we're here. In December last year, there were 4 collapses. System grid. Now we have 2 in 2 hours.
In 2 hours.
It's worrying, but the government has shown its resolve to solving this problem, and that's why they brought on Siemens, because Siemens has a reputation for these matters. So we hope that Siemens will get on top of this and that the incidence of system failures will reduce. To say that it will end now will be complete.
But could it get worse before it gets better?
It goes both ways. It could get worse. It could get slightly better. So if they are able to understand what is triggering these collapses,
Yes.
but ultimately the plan is to break Nigeria up so that there are mini grids, just like what obtains in the US.
Yes.
The US does not have one grid. But this one grid system is a fallout of the military era, where for security reasons you had to have control. But we're expanding at such a rate that having a single grid no longer makes sense from any perspective.
Benga Kamo agrees with you. I was going to ask you that question, so great you touched on it. He says one day that grid is going to collapse completely. Let me add a clause there if we are not careful. Break the grid up. Why have a single grid for the entire country? Can Lagos not have a grid of its own? Without power, there's no industrialization.
Lagos has started that, though. They're somewhat cut off the national grid.
Mr. C, that's linking with the Egin power. I don't remember the name. Egina power plants, right? Mr. C, this is a message for you, by the way, from Femi. He says, we did sign an agreement with Siemens in Yaradwa's tenure, but was not honored or discontinued shortly after his demise. Now we're back to roast again, my country. Shagun says, lack of investment in power, health, roads, education in over 20 years. The chicken is coming home to roost. Yinka says, forget about the bossy mentality of the French over the Francophone African countries. This Boris story is the reason I just get upset with the UK. How can they use the term confiscate, which means to do or to be the forfeited to the claimants, or to give the forfeited to the claimants? And these guys claim that they've colonized us. I just think there should still be that big brother status between the UK and Nigeria. But guess what? Flying President is due in the UK this week. Thank you, Yinka.
All right, Yinka, thanks a lot. And we'll move on to our next story here. Tunde, I'll come to you. AccountantGeneral Wrong. New VAT rate commences February 1, says the Minister of Finance, Budget and National Planning, Zainab Ahmed. She made this statement yesterday. Now, Tunde, on this show, we talked a number of times about how people from the same government seem to speak administration speak from different points. So the Accountant General had an issue. I'll let you take the story. But then the minister comes to refute that claim and say, actually, no, it's a bit worrying, it's concerning, that's on one hand. But please, let's just establish when the VAT will come into operation, the new VAT charge.
Moment. Is it not a fella that has a song about confusion breaking bones? So it's and too often it happens, you're right.
Yes.
according to the law, I mean, look, and my understanding of when, it's not a contract, but when things are signed,
Yes.
right, they take immediate effect, except there are provisions in it that say this is when it will commence. Now, there's no provision that says it's commencing in February, right? So, from all the interpretations I've seen, it is with immediate effect from when it was signed into law.
Although we were corrected, someone sent us a message which was confirmed that it had to be gazetted. So Gazette had to come out before it takes effect. So even though it's been signed into law, it has to be gazetted.
It has to be gazetted.
So perhaps that's the reason for the February 1
Yeah,
date.
but then, okay, so will it be gazetted on the 1st of February?
Well,
It's law, it's one of those things that it's signed into law, so it's effective from that day, but then the gazetting, I think Mrs. Evans was coming, the gazetting probably the thing that, like sort of finalizes it, that this is set and is not changing.
Well, it doesn't change.
But if you're computing VAT, you compute from the time it was signed.
No. Okay, so let me step in. When a law is signed by the president, even though that is the effective signing date, full implementation does not start until it's gazetted.
Okay.
So the finance minister is correct in a certain extent that it will start in February because there's no gazette yet, even though we all know when the president signed the finance bill. So that is probably what she's referring to, that you cannot implement a law
until it's
that hasn't been gazetted, because people need to have copies of what
the interpretation is,
what was passed.
Finally passed.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for that clarification.
Is 1st of February the date?
Probably that is the date they want to insert in the gazette.
Yeah.
All right, so
I need to change my invoices then.
right. Actually, because this
Somebody
is-
already did that.
this is
I
information that a lot
mailed
of
a
people don't know.
package early this week, and they already told me, dude, it's 7.5.
But this has been happening a number of times.
Yeah.
We don't have information. Communication is not clear.
Exactly.
People don't understand. We know what happened with the 15 charge on POS transactions. How long it took for people to reverse
That's done
it.
now, right?
No.
Well, some places
Sorry.
it isn't done.
Changes.
That charge, there are two charges. There's a stamp duty, then there's a merchant's. Some
Oh yeah,
merchants tax.
that's the POS transaction charge. So when they said it was not right to collect it, some merchants were still collecting.
No, you're talking about the same thing. You're talking about the 15 naira stamp duty. You're saying that merchants are not supposed to pass on to customers.
For the POS
Many of them
transactions,
still do,
yes.
especially in the oil and gas,
sector,
fuel stations. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, the only other thing I'll point out, and thanks for that, Mr. C. So there is a need for education for people to, be aware of when these things will commence, because all the inspiration I've seen has indicated it's with immediate effect. The only other thing that I'll point out is in his statement. I mean, the Minister of Finance used the term that you will now suffer 7.5%. Use the word suffer.
Yeah.
Choice of words is everything. Yeah. You will now suffer 7.5%.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, imagine the optics as well. But what happens though, since it's not officially February 1st, can I go seek a refund from
You can try. If it's a large transaction, you can.
9,000?
Right, so Una says it's only suffering issues that comes effectively on the government side, but the one that favors the masses never comes effectively. VAT coming next month, so sharp,
Very
quick.
quickly.
Olufemi says if you're talking about the greed, maybe we have only one, but if it's greed, double E, we have countless. Political, economic, religious, cultural, spiritual.
That's gonna be the best
Olufemi.
messages today. Olufemi, thank you very much for cracking us up. Now the next story is from the Vanguard newspaper. We're determined. We're determined to eradicate child marriage, as what President Buhari said yesterday. He made the statement while they were inaugurating the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs in Abuja. But your thoughts on this story, Waji?
I mean, this is fascinating because C and I were having this conversation downstairs. If you want to eradicate the whole concept of child marriage, it goes a lot deeper than just the laws. You're actually having to, dive deep into cultural nuances that have existed from time memorial with regards to what people feel that they have a right to see. And I know according to certain religious beliefs, especially in the northern part of the country, where they feel that a woman's eligibility for marriage is when she has her menstrual cycle, right? And at a certain point, that was when women were maybe 11, 12, 13, 14, but now women are even getting younger and younger. So the interpretation of when she's ready is now based on that, even though she may still be technically a child. Now, there are a lot of things that were said with regards to this particular statement. about how to eradicate child marriage, and the thing that stuck out for me is that the focus is on educating women, is on making sure women are empowered and everything else.
Yes.
But that for me is where the challenge is. The focus should not be on educating women. The focus should be on educating everybody.
Absolutely.
Not just educating. Why you just want to focus on, so okay, if you say women should go to school and they should be educated and should be empowered and they have the ambition and desire to grow and develop themselves, those are fantastic things. But if they're still going to be subjected to these cultural nuances, then what difference has it made if you don't tackle the issues with people who feel that they have a right to these particular individuals? I mean, look at the issues that come with child marriage. When you look at things like obstetric fistula, for example, that actually breaks down physically the bodies of human beings when they have sex at that particular age. It's horrible. So beyond the laws, it's about educating individuals, men and women. Don't make this a woman problem. It's also a man problem, because you have to get men. You know, I always talk about, because there's so many issues that come out of this, right? And I always talk about how, you know, my brother and I at a very, very early age, when we were in the States, and we had all these guys who were, it was like a scared straight thing where they would bring convicts from prison to come and talk to us about prison life and all these different things. And what these guys kept talking about was, stay away from this, stay away from that. And they scared us into not doing particular things. So with things like rape, they'll tell us that, look, no means no. Even if they be acting in a particular way, if she says no, walk away.
So that's a form of education.
And that's a form of education I'm referring to at a very early age, so that your brain kind of just adjusts to the perspective about how you have to respect another human being because of the possible ramifications that come with it. So the education should not just be on women. Okay, women are going to be fantastic if you just let women be. But if men are not equally educated and equally invested in and equally taught that this is how to respect a woman, then it's just going to be a futile exercise.
In most parts of the world, let's leave out the world first. It's not Nigeria, right? On a larger scale in the north, the female gender receives less education. If you check the metric, it's less education than the men. The men get the most attention. So, I mean, looking at the optics of the story and the address that the president was giving, considering the people that were there, Valentine and the likes, I guess he was just addressing the inequality that, you know, exists in educating the girl child, because they should be able to they should get the power and knowledge to challenge the norms or the rules or the laws that exist.
No, but that's my issue. And I'm not sure if I agree with that, because I know a lot of northern women who are very educated, who actually inspired. The whole Chibok thing is about women who are going through obstacles to get educated. So that's not the debate. If you are still subjected to a society that is forcing you into these things, and family and cultural pressures that are forcing you to do these things. I remember speaking to a very young lady who once ran away from home, and she said all she wanted to do was go to school, but they're bringing one man to marry. So that's not the issue. Is that you need to focus on education as a whole, not just focus on making sure you have schools and infrastructure for women. It's about getting to the root cause of these issues so that you can actually go in line with your ambition of eradicating child marriage.
So education beyond schools.
Education beyond schools.
Thank you, Ajay. Our next story from New Telegraph talks on the senators that have been called bench warmers. It's out of 109 senators in the House. 39 of them could better be described as that. Within the 6 months that they've been on seats, just from around July to December when we went on recess, they hadn't sponsored one bill. What are your thoughts on this, Mr. C?
I'm glad this story is out, because it helps Nigerians to understand the level of inactivity that goes on at National Assembly.
Why did
Now,
you go there?
The process that throws up our representatives, I will continue to say this, Nigerians are at fault for it. We're not involved. So the process just brings all sorts of individuals, and this is one of the results. The consequences, there's no plan, you get there, because there's no plan, you're not doing anything. Now, interestingly, of the 39, 3 of them are from one state, Bayelsa. No senator from Bayelsa has sponsored a bill.
So that means there are no issues in Bayelsa.
So it's...
So Tunde says so.
So it means there are no issues in Bayelsa, right? So can
apparently,
Bayelsa not send
their
any senators?
constituents are okay with their performance, or there's nothing serious
There's no
to
issue
report.
to deal with.
Now, interestingly, some of the senators who came late into this 9th National Assembly because of litigation issues have sponsored bills. Meanwhile, the 39 were there from the start. Nothing doing. The senator who was accused of assault last year, interestingly, is part of the senators that has done nothing. I'm not surprised. So,
but he hasn't done nothing.
no, that was done before. That was
himself.
so really, but seriously, yeah.
Yes.
it speaks to the current state of affairs, and it's good this report is out. I encourage Nigerians to read it,
Yes,
and the
please.
constituents, the people who are represented by these individuals, should begin to ask questions, because there's a recall process. If your senator isn't representing you or carrying out the functions that are supposed to be done for you, recall him.
Simple.
Please, so I just want to say, just like
Yes,
Mr. C said, please read this report, because the names of the senators are
Are there.
listed. So
Mhm.
please, we should know who they are, and we should actually call them to attention and order.
And shout out to New Telegraph for that comprehensive investigative report, because they unearthed these details and revealed it to us in this publication. Premium Times has this next story that we'll go through today. Illegal dismissal. The Nigerian army suffers fourth defeat in courts. Take us through this story, as the industrial court has upheld the decision in favor of Thomas Arigbe after 3 such judgments were passed since the military authorities illegally dismissed him and several officers in 2016.
Exactly, and this is bottom line. This is it's a due process thing. So the court has said that the army didn't follow proper process. Now you say these individuals, these soldiers, these army officials were dismissed for gross misconduct. Now, if someone is accused of gross misconduct, you would expect the person to be queried, right? And depending on the organization and the process they have, it escalates. There can be a verbal query, written queries, and something that escalates into a warning. The civil service, and that's, I believe, the army and soldiers are part of.
Public servants.
The public servants, right? There is a defined process before you can dismiss someone. They have to be documented in their files that they have received warnings and queries for this. So there is a build-up, right? So none of that happened, and they're dismissed. So clearly, it's no surprise to see that they've won the cases. But then, like a number of government institutions and public institutions, they behave with impunity, because the story points out that this is the 3rd similar case that they've lost. But even the other previous judgments from the court have not been obeyed. Right, so even though they've lost previous one, they've been told to reinstate these officers with their benefits, they've not obeyed it. So that also points to why they don't even really care about due process, because they know that they intend to flout whatever judgments come out, and it's very disappointing. They say part of the reasons is, and this is where it probably gets interesting, that these officers were dismissed, some of them were found to be partisan during the last election, during the 2015 election, right? And then the army has a duty to be apolitical and all of that. And some of these officers,
the military has strict rules regarding that.
Yes, very strict rules. Remember when that video came out around, the viral video, and some of those officers going. So they do have those rules, but and they say some of them have cases with the EFCC. Now, if this is the case and they have been found to indeed flouted what the rules are, please, obey due process. You cannot, 2 wrongs don't make a right. So now this officer has done this, but you haven't done what you're supposed to do, leading up to a place and position where you are in right to dismiss the person properly.
It would be interesting to know the military procedure. Maybe they could be reinstated and then dismissed.
It is very possible that they're reinstated, their benefits, their back pays are, and then you go through the process of,
Raji, please, let's quickly touch on this next story from Premium Times. Nigeria outlines 9 focal areas to guide foreign policy in the next 4 years. Seems proactive. What do you think?
I like it, Mr. Jeffrey Yema, and for me, it's a very Nigeria-first policy, which I think is very important. Like I've always said before, time and time again, and even on this show, that since 1976, we have had a non-aligned policy in Nigeria that was spearheaded by Murtala Mohammed, which indicates that the policies of Nigeria have to be first. We're not in any conflict with any country anywhere in the world. We enjoy wonderful relationships with every AU, EU, UN country that exists until today, and we should continue to do that. So the focus for Nigeria should be on things that benefit Nigeria, and it goes on to list things like building sustainable economies, enlarging agricultural output, food security and export, attaining energy sustenance and power, and those things are very critical. So it's a Nigeria first policy that now feeds into your foreign policy, which means that any interaction you have with other countries should now ultimately benefit Nigeria at the end of the day, and not necessarily trying to make sure that country benefits. So any conversations or deals that we go into with any foreign power or any foreign country should be also beneficial towards Nigeria. So I'm all for it. As a nationalist, I agree 100%, and I support it.
And hopefully it increases passport ranking.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Well, there are other. That one is a result of how Nigerians behave
Abroad, yeah.
That's not this.
All right. Thank you very much indeed for your contributions to the conversation this morning. Thank you, Tunde Abikus on Twitter. Thank you, Mr. C, Adi, Mr. C on Twitter, and of course, the corporate MC on Twitter, Nwaji. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who sent in messages. Unfortunately, we couldn't go through all of them, but we continue the conversation online. Please use the hashtag freshlypressed981 to send in your messages. In a few minutes, Tega will be joining us for sports in the locker room 981. And today on Lagos Talks 981, we have a Feel Good Friday edition.
Well done, Jen.